I'm so happy to see you.
And
Cary, you're still alive. It was kind of interesting. Again, going back to this event I did in Korea in 2007, I went and watched a 60-minute interview on you. And this 60-minute interview was mind-blowing because you were literally where it was David versus Goliath. It was this guy out of Tennessee that had this just BHAG, big, hairy, audacious goal to do something that was incredible and crazy at the same time. And as I was watching him, I was inspired because I go, he's doing that. We all can do something to affect the planet. And I go, okay, I got a budget. I got the president of Korea to send you a letter, and you came to Korea and spoke to the audience. And I was mesmerized by you. And then a few years later, you spoke at Metal, and you almost bet us, like, there's no way you're going to do this, but I'm going to invite you to go to Svalbard. And I looked at Lloyd Marino, who was there. I go, Lloyd, can we do it? And Lloyd goes, let's make it happen. And we went up to Svalbard and hung out with you. And it was one of the best trips of my life. So Cary, first, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Yeah, just
Where
fine.
are you? What part of the world?
I'm about 100 miles north of New York City on about a 200-acre farm. This is about as safe as you can be. And we've got freezers and pantries full of food and just hanging out, waiting for the growing season to start. It was snowing earlier this morning. That was not the greatest morning of my life, but anyway.
Oh yeah, because you were all excited to start growing, and now you got frost. And generally it's the first week of May.
Yeah,
just to be safe. But Cary, I heard an old interview of you on NPR, and you started initially to talk about the variety of what apples used to be and what variety of apples are today.
Right.
How many different varieties of apples used to exist?
That's a good question, but there's no real answer to it, Ken, because we, of course, never had a head count of how many varieties existed. You don't know the ones that are extinct. But let's say somewhere between 7,000 or 8,000 and 15,000 to 20,000 different varieties. And when I say varieties, I'm talking about varieties that are as different from one another as Golden Retriever from a Great Dane.
And how many?
And in fact, in this farm here, it's a little bit of a hobby of mine, but we have a small orchard, and I have probably about 125 different varieties of apples growing right outside the door here.
Wow, that's amazing. How many do you think are commercially viable today?
Well, only a handful of those. And of course, many varieties have become extinct. And I think that, it's important to understand that extinction is sort of a process. It occurs as a species loses the ability to evolve. So every time you take away one of those varieties, you're potentially taking away some diversity of that species that's going to be needed in the future for adaptation, maybe adaptation to a climate or adaptation to a pest or disease. And of course, you're taking away, I happen to have a picture here, an old picture of a pear, but I think it illustrates the point. I'll put it up. I don't know how well people can see it, but this is called an Ansalt pear. Anso, I'm not sure how it's pronounced. This is an extinct pear variety. And I remember first coming across it in a very old book, and it was described as being more buttery than any other pear variety. So what happens for us if we lose the pear that is buttery in its flesh? Pears are kind of buttery, and this would be a wonderful thing to have. It's not going to affect the future of the world, but I think it's really nice. And I'm sure Eric would agree that it's good to have these varieties with their different tastes and cooking qualities and nutritional qualities. And we just don't want to lose that stuff to extinction, and we don't have to.
But aren't
Don't have-
seeds in some ways handed down also family to family, and that lineage sometimes breaks and those seeds then disappear?
That's exactly right. I mean, you can be in a family that's handed down a variety of beans for generation after generation, but it just takes one generation for some mistake to happen, or for that generation to move to the city or decide not to do it anymore. And um, so you die the death of 1,000 cuts. And I think there are varieties of our agricultural crops that become extinct every single day of the year.
One thing about Apple, last year, one of the biggest Apple launches happened, and it wasn't from Apple computers. It was actually an apple, and that was the Cosmic Apple,
Mm-hmm.
which was an iteration out of the University of Washington.
Yeah.
And this apple became, I'm not sure if you think it's an abomination to apples, but it was a kind of a man-made crazy apple, right? And it sells out everywhere.
No, I think some of the modern varieties are really good. I'm not a fundamentalist about crop varieties. I'm really more of an anarchist. I think that a lot of different experiments should be tried, and we should be growing a lot of different things and seeing what works. I'm not the kind of person that says, well, it's my way or the highway. This is the only kind of agricultural system that we can have, or the only kind of variety. So heirloom varieties, yeah, I've worked my whole professional life in that, but I've got to say some of the modern varieties are also good.
I like that. So you, because of this audacious goal, you're able to get this seed vault, the global seed vault in Svalbard, which I say correctly now 100% because it's
Doing good. You're doing
one of my
good.
favorite places on the planet. Only a handful of people have ever been in there. You allowed us to go through a tour of the seed vault, which is almost nearly impossible to get into now. It's
It
been
is.
locked up,
Yeah. It's
even for
impossible.
you.
Yeah.
It's crazy.